Okay, Mona, it's time for you to leave, my mother-in-law said loudly. She spoke so loudly that it sounded like the roar of the sea bears in the harbor. We're going on a fancy cruise, just the four of us, right? I asked. But my mother-in-law didn't seem happy. Her face twisted into an even meaner expression. Did you really think someone like you, who can't even keep a house clean, could come with us on this cruise? How audacious of you. Take this money, Clark. A useless daughter-in-law like her doesn't need to have fun. You can't possibly enjoy a vacation at our level. You're too foolish to even understand that. I didn't argue back against her harsh words. In my everyday life, I was used to being treated poorly with no one to support me. I had already given up hope. My mother-in-law laughed rudely and boarded the ship in a cheerful mood for vacation. My father-in-law and husband didn't say anything either. I looked at the three of them quietly, and as the ship sailed away, I waved and shouted goodbye. Best of luck to you. My mother-in-law started yelling back at me, but I ignored her. You're about to go on a trip I've planned for you, she said. Well, it's the best trip for me, at least. Enjoy the surprise revenge I have in store for you. You'll find out the details when you get there. My name is Mona, and I'm a 38-year-old homemaker. I work as a clerk at a medium-sized company. I've been married to Andrew for 7 years. Andrew and I were friends from our college days. We lost touch after graduating, but we started meeting up again by chance. Eventually, we fell in love and started dating about a year later. Shortly after Andrew and I started dating, he shared a secret with me. He told me he was unable to have children because of a condition called infertility. He looked sad when he told me, saying, "If we're together, we won't be able to have kids." But I wasn't upset by it. I never really had a strong desire to have children myself, and I believed we could still find happiness together even without them. So for the past 7 years of our marriage, without any children, we've been living peacefully as a couple. However, our relationship with my parents-in-law has always been difficult. Our house is right across from theirs, and since Andrew works for their company, we see them often. I don't mind that part. The issue is that both of my parents-in-law treat me coldly. My mother-in-law has always favored Andrew, so she doesn't seem to like me much and treats me like a bother. She often tries to pass household chores onto me, which is a common occurrence. She'll say things like, "Mona, I'm busy with work, so could you do the laundry and cleaning?" Or, "Oh, you don't have to cook. I can't eat the food you make anyway." When I explain that I also work full-time and it's hard for me to do everything, she gets angry. She'll say things like, "How dare you talk back to your mother-in-law? You're not fit to be my son's wife. Pack your bags and leave now." On top of that, my father-in-law is also set in his old-fashioned ways. He often says things like, "Mona, when are you going to stop working? You're getting older, so you should have a child soon." Or he'll criticize my education, saying, "What kind of schooling did you even get?" In any case, times have changed. You can have a happy home without children. But that's not the real issue. If I hear more of that talk, I'll call your company tomorrow and demand you quit your job to have a child. Dealing with my in-laws is tough because they're so set in their traditional views. I try to respond politely, but they often respond with even more criticism, so sometimes I just ignore them. Andrew acts like he's unaware of their behavior. He's gentle and avoids conflict, but that's not always helpful. He worries about upsetting his parents, so he sometimes ignores their behavior or even agrees with them to keep the peace. I hate to admit it, but a big reason we haven't had children is because of Andrew's infertility. He asked me not to tell his parents, so I kept it to myself. But it hurts that he doesn't stand up for me when they criticize me. Despite all this, I still love Andrew. He's a good husband who even cooks dinner for me. When I come home late from work, it means we can go out and enjoy ourselves on weekends. Both of us love traveling and have explored many places during our 7 years of marriage. One day, my husband handed me a brochure. "Mona, wouldn't it be amazing to go on a luxury cruise ship? I've never been on one before, only on a ferry." That sounds like so much fun, but we don't have that kind of money right now. Well, let's plan for 2 years from now. We'll save up and work together until then. That sounds like a good idea. We should be able to save enough money in 2 years. Okay, let's do it. So we started focusing on saving money. We avoided unnecessary purchases and did our best to save every penny. Then, 6 months before the trip, my mother-in-law unexpectedly showed up at our house as usual. "Hey, I heard we're going on a luxury cruise. Have you booked it yet? If you don't hurry, you might miss out on reservations." I was surprised by her sudden question and asked her how she knew about our trip. Andrew, sitting across from me, sheepishly admitted, "Oh, I mentioned it to Mom. We'll be away for more than 10 days, so it seemed natural." I get that. But if they find out before we book, they might want to come with us. I wanted to keep it a secret from them. But my mother-in-law kept talking. Work might be busy, but it's important to have fun sometimes, right? I couldn't believe it when my mother-in-law grinned and said, "Of course we're going. My husband will come too." It was shocking. I had wanted to go on this trip with just my husband, not with my in-laws. I looked at Andrew, hoping he would object. I couldn't remember the last time we had a trip together as a family, but Andrew remained silent, and I felt helpless. After that, my in-laws kept visiting and talking about the trip. I thought of asking Andrew, who had suggested the idea, to make the reservations, but he always dodged the conversation, claiming to be busy with work. About a month before the trip, something happened. Andrew went out for a business dinner and didn't return until after midnight. Worried, I grabbed the car keys to go pick him up. Just then, the front door slammed open, and Andrew came in. "I'm tired. I'm going to bed," he said, taking off his jacket and heading straight to the bathroom. I stayed up late, feeling anxious, but he acted like nothing was wrong. Feeling lonely, I picked up his jacket. Something fell out of the pocket. I quickly grabbed it. It was a small gift box with a message card tucked under the ribbon. Without thinking, I read the card, and what I saw shocked me to my core. "Thank you always, Andrew. I love you." My heart sank. As questions swirled in my mind, I couldn't shake off the uncertainty. Who had Andrew been meeting with last night, and who had given him this gift? What did that message really mean? Unable to sleep, I spent the night tossing and turning in the living room. The next morning, Andrew woke up nonchalantly with a big yawn. I confronted him with the gift box and message card. "What's this? Where were you yesterday? It wasn't just a business meeting, was it?" Andrew's eyes widened in surprise. "No, it wasn't like that. It's just that, thanks for helping her with work." "I see. It's quite a passionate thank you saying, 'I love you,'" I remarked. Andrew began stammering and repeating himself, trying to explain. "No, it's not like that. It's just..." Feeling frustrated with the situation, I decided to leave and go to work. Despite feeling uneasy, I managed to focus and finish my tasks by lunchtime. When I checked my phone, I saw numerous missed calls from my in-laws. Feeling annoyed, I hesitantly answered when my mother-in-law called again. "Hey, Mona. I heard you suspect Andrew of cheating on you. Our child would never do such a thing, you know. Even if he did, that's just a man's instinct." Excuse me," my mother-in-law said forcefully before my father-in-law took the phone. "That's right. If anything, it's your fault for doing something to make him cheat on you in the first place. Andrew only cheats because you don't have children and are always working. When you get home, make sure you apologize to my son. Got it?" My father-in-law said, spewing accusations before abruptly hanging up the phone. I'd had enough. My in-laws were painting me as the villain, and my husband, who didn't defend me, even sided with them. After enduring it all for so long, I finally decided to put my plan into action. Then came the day of our departure for the luxurious cruise. My in-laws and Andrew happily got into the car, ready for the trip. I would drive separately to the port and join them there. Inside, I felt a thrill of excitement. "It's going to be a fantastic trip," I said, holding back a laugh as I drove towards the port. But when we arrived, I was surprised to find the port quiet and deserted. I unloaded everyone's luggage and made my way towards the pier, breathing in the scent of the sea. Andrew seemed carefree and playful. Then, just as I was about to board, my mother-in-law approached me with a big smile on her face. "Thanks for booking the trip, Mona. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Don't forget to pick us up." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean? Aren't we all going on this trip together?" My mother-in-law sneered and made a nasty face. "Oh, a daughter-in-law is just a stranger to us. Don't you understand? As long as you pay up, we're fine." I stayed silent. Meanwhile, my father-in-law and husband were happily browsing through travel magazines. Andrew noticed my expression, shrugged, and shamelessly remarked, "Seems like it's true. By the way, I haven't seen any luxury cruise ship around. Where is it?" My mother-in-law looked around suspiciously, noticing the lack of other passengers. "Did you get the right location, Mona?" Don't worry, just enjoy yourselves from here, I said as I watched them board the boat. Is this really the right ship? My father-in-law muttered, eyeing the small boat in front of him. It's just a smaller boat to transfer you to the luxury cruise ship. It's a safety precaution, I reassured them. Don't worry, get on board quickly. I urged them onto the small boat with their luggage. Take care, I called to the boatman as they set off. Goodbye. Best of luck to you. With a big smile, I waved goodbye to them. I thought I heard my mother-in-law shouting something, but I ignored it. Once they disappeared from view, I gathered my things and headed back to the car, hoping for a fun trip ahead. Later, when I returned home, I gathered all the belongings I had before getting married, clothes, appliances, and furniture, and placed them in one spot. Just as I finished, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. How dare you trick us? There's no luxury cruise ship. Where are we? She shouted. Her frantic tone amused me, and I couldn't help but laugh. After a moment, I decided to respond to her question. There never was a luxury cruise ship. I knew you'd try to leave me behind, so I didn't book anything. Do you really think you could get away with this? Where are we? I could call the police, my father-in-law's voice chimed in. The police? That's a bit much, don't you think? I simply brought you to your wife's hometown. Did you get a chance to see Aunt Mel? I replied. Once again, my mother-in-law shouted, What are you talking about? Aunt Mel, your older sister Mel. I spoke to her, and she suggested bringing you all there. She'll likely take good care of you, I clarified. Aunt Mel, who was like a mother figure to my mother-in-law, had a strong stance against dishonesty. Despite only meeting her a few times at family gatherings, we had always gotten along well. So, I decided to open up to her and share everything I had been going through with my in-laws and husband. As I had expected, Aunt Mel was furious but immediately offered her support. I'll come pick you guys up soon, she said, ending the call. Shortly afterward, I moved to a new apartment closer to my workplace, which made my daily commute much easier. During the move, I collected evidence of my husband's infidelity. He had been careless, leaving behind plenty of proof. By the time I had settled into my new place, I had gathered enough evidence to support my divorce case. With the help of a lawyer, we successfully finalized the divorce. I also sought compensation for the emotional damage caused by the affair. The lawyer who met with my ex-husband, Andrew, reported that he looked devastated and exhausted. Meanwhile, Aunt Mel, a well-known sports instructor in the local community, had been keeping my in-laws and Andrew extremely busy from morning till night. They were now living a life as demanding as the one they had imposed on me. Aunt Mel mentioned that if they genuinely repented, they could be released from their duties. However, my in-laws' family business had practically gone bankrupt, and they had nowhere else to turn. But their struggles were no longer my concern. I simply hoped to never have to see them again. On a brighter note, I've recently met a kind and understanding man who accepts me, including my divorce and all that led up to it. Once his work becomes less hectic, we plan to get married. Although my journey to happiness has been challenging, I'm looking forward to a joyful life with someone who always prioritizes me.
This time, let your brother have a baby. You can have another one later. I told my parents I was pregnant. Then my mom said something shocking. Zach and his wife Rosie, who can't have kids, want us to give them our baby for adoption. My parents always favored Zach and ignored me. The happy future I imagined with my first baby turned into sadness. I'm Olivia. I've been married to Walt for 3 years. We're happy and thinking about having a baby soon. But I haven't been close to my family because of issues with my parents and brother Zach. In our family house, my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie all live together. Zach has been praised since he was little, excelling in school and landing a job at a big company, which he'll probably take over from Dad. Our parents have always adored him. I, on the other hand, didn't stand out academically and wasn't as good-looking, so I never felt that close to our parents. I often felt left out and lonely because Zach got so much attention. Mom especially favored him, always by his side and hardly ever paying attention to me. When she did talk to me, it was usually criticism. Zach followed Mom's lead and didn't treat me well either, so we never really got along. I felt like I didn't belong at home and became more and more isolated. Because of that, right after finishing high school, I moved out. My parents didn't seem bothered when I told them I was leaving. If anything, they seemed happy about it. After leaving, I found a job, and 3 years later, I married Walt, who was in the same class as me. I wanted to start my own family and find peace away from my parents' influence. I only go back home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I don't really want to, but my parents insist. They care a lot about appearances, and it wouldn't look good if their daughter never visited. So I put up with it and visit twice a year. I reluctantly went back this Thanksgiving, but my mother was as distant as ever. "You and your husband are still not that impressive," she said, dampening the festive atmosphere. She started being sarcastic right away. She only called us back to say such things. If she's going to be like this, she shouldn't even bother calling, I thought, trying to ignore her sarcasm. But she kept going. "We're worried about you. You two live so modestly. We always think you'll come asking for money. My family is pretty wealthy, but since I left, I've never asked for financial help. Walt and I manage fine on our own earnings. We even send them proper birthday gifts. We would never do that," I quickly replied to her unfounded accusation. Then she said, "But you two are still earning modestly, right?" and turned to look at Walt next to me. "Walt, you're still at that detective agency, right? How long do you plan to stick with that questionable job? Aren't you embarrassed?" Indeed, Walt works as a detective, something she always mocks. She sees detective work as sketchy and inferior to regular jobs. As Walt tried to explain his job to her, Zach jumped in. "Mom, there's no point in even listening to that. Detective work is shady, something nobody respectable does. It's a job for people beneath us. The pay must be peanuts compared to mine," showing off his superiority. Zach shared her disdain for detective work, a sentiment we've heard since we got married. Walt stayed quiet, but I felt upset that his job was being dismissed outright. Walt has always been my support, understanding what my family is like since our college days. That's why he always joins me when we visit my parents, not wanting to leave me alone, even though he knows it won't be pleasant. I still feel guilty about it. Like many visits before, this one ended on a sour note. Around that time, we decided to live modestly together, unaffected by my family's opinions. Something amazing happened in our 3rd year of marriage. I found out I was pregnant. I was thrilled to be expecting our first child. Knowing how my parents always put me down, I felt like I had to share the news with them, so I went to our family home to tell them. It had been a while since I visited outside of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie were all there, but their reaction to my announcement caught me off guard. When my mother heard the news, she suddenly got loud. "How could you say that in front of Zach?" Her response was unexpected. I wasn't expecting congratulations, but this was different. I was confused by her mentioning Zach, and when I looked puzzled, she dropped a bombshell. "Zach and Rosie can't have kids. How could you be so insensitive?" I had no clue they were dealing with infertility. Shocked by her words, I glanced at them. Zach seemed uncomfortable, and Rosie looked down sadly. "You're having a baby before Zach. If it wasn't for Rosie, this wouldn't be happening." My mother sighed dramatically, looking between Rosie and me. Seeing this, Zach stepped in. "Rosie already feels bad enough. Don't be too hard on her, Mom." I was surprised to hear him defend Rosie. From what I knew from my visits, Zach wasn't usually that supportive of her. "You're really kind, Zach." Then Zach said something that made me pause. "Rosie, if it weren't for being married to Zach, you would have been divorced by now." My mother shot Rosie a glare. Maybe despite everything, Zach does care about his wife. As I watched Zach calm our mother down, I thought about what had just happened. Well, I shared my news, so I should head home, I said, feeling the tension rise because of my announcement. But then my mother said something unbelievable. "Give your baby to Zach." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Give my baby to Zach. Why should I? I can have another baby if I want to. Just because Rosie can't have children doesn't mean I should give mine away. That's unfair and ridiculous. When I refused, my mother argued, "This is our first grandchild. It should be raised by us. Zach will take over the company, so we should raise the baby." Her words made me furious. She was planning to take my unborn child just to ensure a successor for our father's company. She talked about adoption like she had it all planned out, but I was too angry to listen. I was already irritated, and then Zach said something shocking. "Well, since Rosie can't have kids, it's good for her that you got pregnant. You're finally doing something for the family." I couldn't believe it, but Zach seemed to agree with my mom. Even Dad, who usually stays quiet, nodded along. It felt like the whole family was claiming my baby as their own. I couldn't believe how casually Zach spoke to his own wife like that. acting like it was no big deal. I realized there was no point in arguing further, so I left right away. All they said was, "Give us an answer next time you come," and didn't even come to say goodbye. Rosie, who must have been hurt, silently watched me leave. Even after I got home, I couldn't shake off my anger. Instead of celebrating my pregnancy, they made this unreasonable demand. I felt gloomy thinking about the future. They'd probably keep pushing for adoption even after the baby was born. When I told Walt what happened after he got back from work, he was shocked too. Even he couldn't find the words to respond. He knows my family, but this was beyond belief. A few days later, we were surprised by an unexpected visitor at home. "What brings you here all of a sudden?" "It's rare to see you alone," I said to Rosie. She looked tired, with dull skin and messy hair. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at us. "Olivia, I'm really sorry about what happened the other day," she said, referring to when I announced my pregnancy. It wasn't her fault, but she seemed burdened by the unreasonable demands my family had made. Then she said she had something important to discuss. "What is it?" I asked, inviting her in to talk. What she told me was shocking, and my anger flared up again. Trying to stay calm, she shared a significant truth with me. Walt had been quietly listening to our conversation, and then chimed in with something equally astonishing and infuriating. Rosie's tears started again as she listened to Walt. With this new information from both of them, I made a decision. I vowed to myself to hold my parents and Zach accountable, to settle past grievances and seek justice. 3 months later, with my belly starting to show, Walt and I visited my family home. My parents, Zach and Rosie, were there. Without even a greeting, my mother asked, "You've decided to give the baby to Zach, right?" It seemed like she couldn't think of anything else. As I said before, that's not happening. I replied, but my parents glared at me as if they couldn't accept it. "No matter what you say, we're taking that baby. Stop being stubborn," my mother said, clearly angered by my refusal. Zach and my father just watched, not intervening. "No matter how much you insist, I'll never give the baby away. But I came here today to show you something." "Is that okay, Rosie?" I asked, looking at Rosie, who nodded silently. Rosie intends to divorce Zach, and this is why. I pulled out some photos from an envelope I had brought. That was the reason for my visit today. Zach was speechless as he looked at the photos. They clearly showed him kissing another woman and entering a hotel. Undeniable proof of his infidelity. "Shocked to have been caught," he muttered. "Who took these photos?" Our parents, standing next to Zach, looked bewildered, their gaze shifting between him and me. They probably had no idea about his affair. "It was Walt who took these," I said. Walt, who had been silently observing, explained how he had come across the photos. As a detective, he had seen Zach with another woman while working on a case. Out of curiosity, he investigated further and found out about Zach's affair. The decisive moment was captured in those photos, as Zach thought he had cleverly hidden his affair. He was stunned and speechless. "Adultery is grounds for divorce. You need to compensate Rosie properly," I said, breaking the tense silence. But Zach, instead of apologizing, blamed Rosie for his actions. "Yeah, it's your fault, Rosie. You're so incompetent. I'm just having a little fun outside," he said, with our mother backing him up, trying to shift the blame away from Zach. Seeing Rosie treated like I once was made me feel terribly sorry for her. So I decided to confront my family to save both of us. I pushed them further by pointing out Zach's faults. "Zach, you mocked Walt, but a professional detective's skills are extraordinary. Evidence kept piling up as soon as he started investigating. And we found out something shocking about your mistress," I said, watching my parents tense up, wondering what would come next. "The woman you're seeing seems to be the daughter of a mafia boss," I revealed, watching Zach freeze in shock. He must not have known that. My mother screamed, "What? Is that true?" Upon hearing the revelation, she collapsed to the ground, covering her face, while my father looked terrified. "Zach, you were pretending to be single, right?" I asked, and Zach started to panic. "No, I didn't know either." Our parents, who had been so authoritative just moments ago, were now completely bewildered by this unexpected revelation. Then Rosie spoke up amidst the confusion. "You didn't just deceive your mistress, did you?" Her words brought tension back into the room. She repeated what she had told me during her visit. "You're infertile, aren't you?" Zach's face betrayed a look of realization. Our parents stared at him in shock. They had blamed Rosie for their infertility issues, but the truth was it was Zach himself. Did you know, Rosie? That was all he could manage to say. Our stunned parents struggled to find their next words, visibly shaken by the revelation. Rosie delivered the final blow. I found out accidentally while cleaning the room. She had stumbled upon his infertility diagnosis hidden in his desk drawer. Unable to admit it to his loving parents, Zach had kept this fact a secret and blamed Rosie for their infertility. Believing his words, our parents had unfairly blamed Rosie. His protective comments about Rosie when I announced my pregnancy were probably driven by his guilt over the issue. Blamed for something she had no control over, Rosie suffered every day. As the conversation turned to the topic of taking my child, Rosie spoke with a calm, unchanged expression. Meanwhile, my parents, just learning the shocking truth, were in a panic. To think Zach will never have a child, that's just... My mother began, despairing at the thought of not having a grandchild. But then she turned her hysterical anger towards him. You knew it was your fault, yet you blamed your wife. Did you cheat because you knew you were infertile? How come my son stooped so low? Oh dear, why did this happen? She vented her frustration at him. Finally, Zach spoke, offering a pitiful explanation. I was shocked to find out I was infertile. I felt guilty for not giving you a grandchild. When I found out Olivia was pregnant with a boy, it just seemed convenient. His words filled me with contempt. Pushing aside my anger, I delivered the final blow to the three of them. Your selfish actions hurt Rosie and me. And Zach, you had an affair with such a dangerous person. Mom and Dad, you'll have to face the consequences of your actions. You've hurt so many people, now it's time to face the music. My words prompted them to apologize, their earlier bravado gone. Where did that confidence go when you asked me to give up my son? I looked at them with disdain, feeling as though I was looking at garbage. Beside me, Rosie remained silent, her gaze fixed ahead, silently conveying the depth of her sorrow. Tough times lay ahead for Zach and my parents. When the father of Zach's mistress discovered the affair, they were summoned and forced to apologize repeatedly. Despite ending the affair, Zach had to pay a hefty compensation for deceiving the woman. The amount was staggering, teaching them the harsh consequences of getting involved with such people. As a result, our family home descended into chaos. My father had to step down as company president due to the public scandal, and my mother became isolated, shunned by the neighbors and withdrawing into herself. Their relationship became hostile, constantly arguing over Zach's actions. Zach lost his job after the scandal reached his company, and to add to his troubles, his divorce with Rosie was finalized. Struggling with unemployment and financial burdens, Zach found himself trapped in a cycle of relentless work. Around the time Rosie successfully left the family home, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Both the baby and I were in good health, and I reveled in the joy of welcoming new life. Our family of three embarked on happy days together. Eventually, Walt and I made the decision to sever all ties with my family. Although I have been torn about cutting off contact with my parents and brother, that incident made me realize it was the best decision for my son's well-being. Despite their absence, I have found solace and love in my irreplaceable family. From now on, I choose to cherish